Hey, welcome back. In a previous video, we covered how to accept variable amounts with Stripe Checkout using PHP. So we set up a simple PHP server to basically handle the use case for donations. And recently I got a comment down here a couple days ago from Arun that asked if we can show how to do this in Node or with JavaScript. That would be awesome. So what I wanted to do was go through today and build out a simple Express server for handling checkout with donations. So let's jump over to Replit. So Replit is an online sort of IDE that you can use. We'll create a new REPL here called Node.js, and we'll just say like, I don't know, checkout donations, and create the REPL. And this will spin up a little environment that we can share the link in the YouTube description. So the very first thing we want to do is grab reference to Express. So we're going to say const express is equal to require express. And then we want to create a new app by executing the express function that comes back from that. And then what we're going to do is we also want to create an instance of the Stripe object. We're going to require Stripe, and that's going to return a constructor function where we're going to pass in our publishable key. So process.env.stripe, or our secret key, Stripe secret key. And over here we can set our secrets. So I'm going to say, okay, we want to add a Stripe secret key. And that is my test secret key. And I'm going to say add new secret. Okay, so now what we should be able to do is say const, or like, I guess we'll need an async function to test this out, async. And then we're going to say const session equals await checkout, or stripe.checkout.sessions.create. And then we want to pass in a bunch of stuff, and we'll console.log session. So let's see if we can just get this sort of like giving us some errors. We have a little bit of a feedback loop. So it's going to run and install these dependencies that we're requiring at the top for us. That's a really handy feature of Replit, is it kind of like does that for you. So yeah, now it's installing Express. All right, so it's saying that we have an error on line 6. So I think this needs to be an immediately invoked function expression. I wasn't actually invoking that. So I'm going to run that. Require blah, blah, blah is not a function. Okay, let's just run it like this. So we will say Stripe checkout sessions create. Let's see if we can just run it at the top level. Await is only valid inside an async function. So function, or async function run. And we'll put all this in here. And we'll say run. Okay, great. So we're getting an error back, missing required param success URL. That's great. So here we can say success URL is, I don't know. For now, we'll just say example.com. This is where we're going to redirect the customer after they successfully pay. Cancel URL is going to be example.com. And then we need to pass in some line items. And we also need to pass in a mode payment. And the line items here, we're going to pass in the payment, or the price data. The price data allows us to specify price data on the fly. So I think we can say unit amount is, I don't know, $10. Currency is USD. You can pass in other currencies here. And then we also need product data. We can either say product and give it a product ID, or we can say product data and define the product data also on the fly. And here, I think we can just pass name is test. Okay, so let's see if we get any errors from this one. Quantity is required, add quantity to line items 0. So we're going to say quantity is 1. All right, let's run this again. Missing required params, payment method types. Okay, so the payment method types we want to support here, maybe we'll say, this is going to be a list of payment method types. So we can say card, and maybe we also say Alipay, and I don't know, that's probably good. Great. Now we can rerun this. Very cool. Now we're getting back a checkout session. So this is sort of the API call that we need to make to Stripe. And in order to actually have this work with a web application with Express, we need to set up Express so that it actually works here. So app.listen 4242, let's just say 4242, that'll start the app listening on 4242. We haven't actually defined any routes, but I want to just see if we can fire up the server. So it's still going to log this out, cannot get /. That's fine. I wanted to grab this URL though, because we want to plop that in here. And that will be sort of our success and cancel routes. And then we don't actually want to call run anymore. We're happy with how that is set up and working. So we want to say app.post to, let's see, /create session. You can call it whatever you want. Async, rec, res. So this is going to be the request and response that we're getting back. And this is where we actually want to create the checkout session, is inside of this, this route here is where we want to create the checkout session. So let's see if I can make that a little smaller and this a little bigger so that we can see a little better. All right, so we've got our session here. And I think rather than logging out the session, we want to say like res.send, I think, or res.json maybe, session. I can't actually remember how that works. Yeah, so let's see if we can stop, and then let's also make an app.use. I think we want to set up static, right? So, all right, so if we receive a GET request to /, we will just look up some file that's in the same directory called index.html. So let's go back to our files here and add a new file called index.html. And on this page, what do we want to do? HTML. And we also need, I guess we need a whole form. So we'll say like ID donation form. So it's been so long since I watched that last episode that I don't actually remember exactly how it was set up or what methods we used here. But I guess we can give it a label, and inside of that label we'll put an input box with the type of number, step is equal to 1, and then or like 0.01 for cents, and then we'll say ID is amount. And okay, so I think that should be interesting. Amount, we'll save that. And then up here, we want to have a head tag that has Stripe.js installed from js.stripe.com/v3. And what else do we need? I guess we're going to ultimately write some JavaScript to handle this form submission. So down here we can write a script tag. I'm going to say pull in the source from .. No, let's just implement it. Let's just implement it inline, just so we can keep things super easy. And we want to initialize a new instance of Stripe here. So we're going to say Stripe is equal to Stripe, and we're going to pass in our publishable key. Okay, I'm going to take a look at my test data here for API keys. Grab my publishable key and come back over here and plop that there. And now I can say when, let's see, button is equal to document.getElementById btn, and we'll give the button an, or no, let's get the form. Let's get the form. So this is going to be the form. And then we'll say form.addEvent listener submit, and what do we want to do? We want to say async. This is going to be an async event. We're going to prevent default so that the page doesn't do like a full page reload. And then we want to create the checkout session on the server, and then we want to redirect to checkout. So the redirected checkout is we call stripe.redirect to checkout, and we pass in the session ID, And so the thing that we want back from the server is the session ID from that checkout session. So we're going to use the fetch API, fetch, and we're going to make a post request to create session, I believe. And we're going to pass in some data. So create session, right? Yeah, create session. That's the endpoint that we created, the post endpoint that we created. So from our HTML, this is what we're making the post request to. And what do we need to pass in here? All right, so the method for this one is going to be a post request. Headers, we're going to pass in content type is application JSON. And that's probably the only header that we need. And then we need a body, which is going to be json.stringify. The, I guess the donation amount, which we can get from amount.value. Here I'm banking on the fact that the ID for this input is amount. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's go back to index.js. We've got some error here about resolving. Yes, resolve is not. So we're going to use resolve from path. Const resolve is equal to require path. Another node library. Oops. All right, so let's stop and restart the server and see if we can get that showing up on the page here. All right, so now we've got an amount input and a donate button. So if we wanted to donate, I don't know, $100 and we click donate, that doesn't do anything yet because I think this is wrong, send. And then we want to pass back session ID as session.id from our node endpoint here. So let's stop and then restart this. So when we hit the create checkout session endpoint, the other thing we need to do is then instead of passing the unit amount here, we want to pass in like the amount that we're donating. So like const donation amount is equal to request.body. I think we can actually just destructure that and pull that off if I recall correctly. So now we can say stop. We want to pass that donation amount times 100 because we're passing the donation amount down as a floating point value, and we want to make that an integer value of cents. So we're going to take the donation amount that was entered into the form and multiply by 100, and we'll pass that to parseInt. We can also specify, I don't know, the base. All right, so let's retry this. So now we see an amount, $100, right? And this allows you to like kind of go up by certain cents. So if we click donate now, type error of donation amount of rec.body as it's undefined. Here we go, app.use express.json. Let's try that. I think this is the JSON middleware that we need in order for it to know to parse out the request body if it comes in with the content type application JSON. Maybe, let's see, donate, and no errors in the server log, but we are also not redirecting. So let's open this up and see if we can open up the console here. You can say right click and inspect, go to the sources tab. Okay, we've got our amount set up over here, 2323. Go to our index tab in the sources. And I want to break right here just so we can see what the amount of value is, 2323, okay. That's being passed in as a string value. So we might have some interesting things that happen there. Let's keep going. All right. What did we get back from the server? So if we look at the network tab, we can see our create session request, and that's our request payload. And then we can look at the response, and it looks like we're not getting any response. So does this not work? Response.send, right? I thought this was how we sent a response. Play. Oh, here we go. Yeah, session ID. That's the checkout session ID. That's what we want. So why isn't it? I wonder why that's not getting pulled off over here. Oh, you know what it is? When we're making a fetch API call, we need to say .then and then convert this into JSON. All right, let's retry this again. Refresh the page. 123.45, donate. And now we are redirected. And the price that we're paying is $123.45. We've got our Alipay payment method, our card payment method, Google Pay. We can go through the whole flow. And click pay. This is again in test mode, so I'm using just test card numbers. And now we should be redirected back to the donation page. So in the success URL, right now when we're redirecting back, we're redirecting to exactly this URL. If we want to have the session ID, the ID of the checkout session, in the return URL, so we can like look up the session and thank them for how much they donated, we want to add a query string parameter here that says, you can name it whatever you want, like session ID equals, and then in like curly braces, you have to put like checkout session ID, just like this, and then the checkout session ID will be replaced. Like this curly string thing will be replaced by Stripe checkout when it's redirecting back, so that you'll have access to that in the query string params. So if then we make another, actually let's make another route here, like /success, and then we can say like app.get/success. And then we can say const session ID is, or we'll pull it off again, session ID is equal to rec.query. And then we want to retrieve the checkout session, await stripe.checkout.sessions.retrieve, and we're going to pass in that session ID. And we can even pass in like expand for the line items, and then we'll get more details. And we want to res.send this whole session back to the client. So on this success path, we're just going to send back JSON. So if we, let's go through the flow again, just so we can see what this query string thing looks like. So we'll stop and then restart and refresh this page. And let's say 45, we want to pay $45. We're going to donate $45. All right, we're donating, and we're going to use Alipay, donate $45. It's processing. We go to the Alipay test page, we authorize the test payment, and then we are redirected. All right, I spelt checkout wrong, and I think that might have, so that didn't work. All right, so let's restart this and try again, and say we'll say 23, donate, Jenny Rosen, Alipay, processing for 23. All right, we're redirected to Alipay. We're going to authorize the test payment. And we're redirected back to /success, and you'll see the session ID in the URL, and this has the ID of the checkout session. And you'll notice that the JSON for that session is returned to us. And down here we can see the line items for what they purchased, including the unit amount here, which is $23. That's like in cents, so hopefully that is legible. Yep, so we've got our amount subtotal here, also $23. So we could show like a thank you page for thanks so much for donating $23. We could also use the email they entered at checkout in order to send an email thank you. Now, when you're using Stripe Checkout in order to collect donations, one of the things you can do is update the submit type here to say donate instead of pay. So we can come down here to right after mode, and we'll say submit type is donate. and we'll restart and go through this process yet again. And then if we enter 23 and click donate, now when we're redirected, notice that the button down here says donate instead of pay. What else do we got? If we need to, we can also collect tax IDs. We can set a locale if we know what language the customer speaks. And I think that might be all that is relevant for for creating checkout sessions in order to collect variable amount checkout in Node. I'll share a link to this REPL in the video description. Hopefully this is helpful for you, Aaron. And otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.